Konnichiwa, hajimemashite. My name is Keith Comstock. I'm the Director of International Trade and Development for the Alaska Department of Commerce, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to discuss the future of Japanese trade in Alaska. On behalf of Governor Mike Dunleavy, as well as Commissioner Julie Anderson, the Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Commerce, welcome. Governor Dunleavy and Commissioner Anderson place a great deal of emphasis on the importance of international trade to our state. This is especially true of our partnership with Japan and the Asia Pacific, which is why I was appointed as the Director of International Trade and Development. During my career in the private sector, I had numerous opportunities to work with our partners in Europe, Latin America, and Asia to build business relationships and solve problems on a number of issues. One of the more recent examples of this was actually assisting the Alaska Aerospace Corporation to secure a deal with the Brazilian Space Agency for training and commercial launch assistance with their Alcantara Launch Center. I bring this up as an example of the important work that we can do together because Alaska, Alaskan government, and Alaska business understand the importance of international trade and the role that governments can play in enabling those kinds of transactions. So the real question before us is this: why Alaska? Why come here? Well, to answer that question, let's start with the question of what is Alaska? To the Aleuts, Alaska was known as Alaskak, meaning the mainland, or the object towards which the action of the sea is directed. To others, it was known as Alyeska, or the Great Land. More commonly, though, Alaska is known as the 49th state of the United States. We were purchased from Russia in 1867 for less than $5 per square kilometer in what was commonly called Seward's Folly, after Secretary of State William H. Seward, who was appointed by President Abraham Lincoln. Secretary Stewart championed the purchase, and on Monday, Alaska will be celebrating our holiday named annually in his honor. At the time of the purchase, critics of the deal didn't see the point of buying the territory. We were far from the main portion of the United States, and they didn't see much value in the investment. But as often happens here, Alaskans were happy to prove the critics wrong, especially after gold was discovered in Juneau in 1880 and in the Klondike in 1896, and then afterwards when oil was discovered first in 1957 and then again on Alaska's North Slope in 1968. To me, the main lesson from that is that Alaska is full of treasures for those willing to look. But putting aside the gold rush and the oil boom, Alaska is also arguably the most strategically located state in the United States. The common saying is that we're about 9.5 hours by air from anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. And even famous U.S. Army General Billy Mitchell, who is generally credited for the creation of the U.S. Air Force, claimed on the floor of Congress prior to World War II that the simple fact is that Alaska is the most strategic location in America and important for the world. But the simple fact is that Alaska is the U.S.'s most eastern, western, and northern state, and we're about 2,000 kilometers closer to Japan than any other U.S. mainland destination. We're also the largest state in the Union. In fact, we sometimes like to tease our Texan cousins by saying that if you were to cut Alaska in half, Texas would still only be then the third largest state. The reality of the situation, though, is that Alaska is nearly 2/3 the size of the rest of the United States and has a coastline longer than the rest of the United States combined. This has given us incredible opportunities, such as our multi-billion-dollar cruise industry and our multi-billion-dollar fishing export industry, the largest in the United States. But besides our size and location, Alaska is also a place of culture and tradition. Some anthropologists believe that Alaska is the site of the first human habitations in North America, with hunters following game across what was known as the Bering Land Bridge. These tribes would then migrate south to populate the North American landscape and become the predecessor of the United States' 574 Alaska Native or American Indian tribes. In fact, Alaska is still home to the descendants of these ancient pioneers. Of the United States' 574 recognized tribes, 229 can still call Alaska home and practice the traditions their people have refined for generations. As for Alaska's industrial structure, we have been a resource extractive oriented economy for essentially our entire statehood. 17.6% of our gross domestic product can be directly attributed to oil and gas extraction or pipeline transportation services, while our mining and mining support industries constitute another almost 5% of our direct gross domestic product, while fishing and fishing manufacturers account for an annual revenue of roughly $2 billion, or approximately 4% of our GDP, and provide a source of income to several of our smaller coastal communities. The remainder of our economy is based in either local, state, or federal government services, real estate, healthcare services, tourism, retail, or other service-oriented industries. That being said, the industries that drive our economy are principally oriented towards export. Alaska exports over $4 billion in goods annually all over the globe, though our largest partners are in Asia. In fact, Japan was Alaska's third largest export partner in 2020, a relationship for which we are honored, grateful, and optimistic that we can make even stronger. So now that we've discussed Alaska's location, history, industries, export partners, all the things that Alaska has, we haven't quite touched on what Alaska is. Alaska is a way of life, something imbued in the people that live here. All of the $54.4 billion in productivity generated by the state is produced by less than 750,000 people. Alaskans are among the most productive people in the United States, earning the third highest GDP per capita of any state in the Union, and outperforming the population of states like California, Texas, Florida, Washington, and Oregon. Moreover, Alaska is young, able, and educated. Almost 2/3 of our population is working age, and we have the 5th highest percentage of high school educated citizens in the country. We take the education of our youth very seriously, and that has paid dividends for us, especially in the fields of healthcare and engineering. In fact, the University of Alaska Fairbanks happens to operate the Poker Flats facility, the largest land-based rocket research range in the world, as well as the only high-latitude rocket range in the United States, where they work with NASA to use sounding rockets to take readings of our atmosphere and study our famous Aurora Borealis or Northern Lights. Alaskans are also almost constantly in motion, whether it's working, hiking, skiing, fishing, hunting, or flying. One of the benefits of being blessed with such an abundance of natural beauty is that you have the striking urge to see it all, which is why Alaska is one of the largest destinations for civil aviation in the world. This happens to also help provide pilots and flight expertise to Ted Stevens International Airport, which recently earned the reputation of being the world's busiest cargo airport and moves nearly 3 million tons of cargo to destinations around the world annually. So now that you know a little bit more about what Alaska and Alaskans are, now might be a good time to get back to why you might want to be here as well. The most obvious answer is that we are a resource-rich location. Oil and gas resources have been a steady source of revenue for generations, and it is estimated that as many as 640 billion barrels of oil and 214 trillion cubic feet of natural gas remain beneath Alaskan soil. We're also home to the second largest reserve of coal in the world, as well as the 7th largest reserve of zinc and the 10th largest reserve of gold. The U.S. Geological Service also believes that Alaska has high potential for the discovery of strategic and critical elements such as thorium, niobium, tantalum, indium, gallium, germanium, rare earth elements, platinum group metals, tin, manganese, titanium, and vanadium. These are minerals used in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles to solar panels to spacecraft. And considering the fact that China has essentially cornered the global market on some of these types of minerals, a discovery and further development in Alaska would have profound value both in terms of monetary return and geostrategic importance. We're also home to the largest swath of forested lands in the United States, as well as the largest fisheries in the United States, which not only attracts the interest of bald eagles and humpback whales, but also generates billions in annual seafood sales. We've also mentioned some of the reasons to be in Alaska already. That is to say that Alaska already has a thriving tourism industry that stimulates more than $4 billion in economic activity in the state annually. The benefit, however, to having nearly 1.5 million square kilometers of beautiful mountains, plains, forests, and streams is that there's always room to grow. especially considering that the majority of tourism at the moment is focused on visiting by water or cruise line tourism during the summer months. The reality is that Southeast Alaska, where the majority of tourism takes place, is very different from, say, Kodiak Island, or Nome, or the Kenai Peninsula, or the Tanana River Valley, or the Arctic Circle, or the Aleutian Islands. After all, think of the difference between Kamakura and Roppongi. These are places separated only by a few kilometers and not the entire length of Honshu. Then there's the matter of Alaska being a natural aerial shipping hub with the potential to grow even more, considering the impact that COVID-19 has had on the growth of e-commerce. Again, Alaska is only 9.5 hours away from anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, a time frame that could shrink to less than an hour as research in commercial space and point-to-point shipping progresses. It just so happens that this is something which the Alaska Aerospace Corporation is interested in exploring with, and considering that they're the owners of the only non-government launch facility in the United States, I would say that I like not only our location, but that our chances for continued success. We're especially optimistic about the next few years since the government of the United States and Canada have approved the border crossing for an Alaska to Alberta freight railroad, which is intended to move bulk freight from Alberta's manufacturing and processing districts, and of course the rest of the lower 48 and North American continent, to the port of Alaska, as well as transporting oil sands from Alaska to Canada. This also means that goods from the lower 48 states of the United States could be transported via rail to Anchorage and vice versa, reducing transit times by anywhere from 2 to 4 days one way. This has the potential to cause immense growth across the state after the project is completed by 2026. Alaska is poised and ready to grow, with a gamut of investment opportunities for investors of all interests and strategies. Our mature industries offer steady growth and a field of experts informed by generations of industry experience, while our developing industries are poised to forge into the next frontier. Industries worthy of consideration include destination tourism, horticulture, agriculture, aquaculture, and green energy, all of which are poised to take the next steps into a sustainable future with significant returns for the adventurous investor. And best of all, Alaska is one of the few states with no corporate income tax for S corporations or limited liability corporations, meaning investors get to keep more of the money that they make. So if the question is, why Alaska? The answer is simple. The place, the products, the people, and the promise. Let us help you, your business pioneer, the next frontier. So come to Alaska, your future awaits. Arigato matane. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to work with you in the days and months ahead. Below is my contact information. I would welcome your inquiries. And again, thank you very much. Again, thank you. And in conclusion, I'd like to say a few words to my friends in Japan. I'd especially like to thank the Japanese consul, and we are working closely with Masaru Aniya and the consular office of Japan in Anchorage. And again, I'd also like to thank my friends at JETRO and the folks, especially in JETRO San Francisco, for a lot of hard work and support, and very appreciative of what they've done for Alaska. And I look forward to meeting new businesses and look forward to seeing new business partnerships between Alaska and Japan development, and ultimately to make new friends. And I've visited Japan many times in the past, and look forward to working with you in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Again, thank you and arigato. Good afternoon.